Sometimes the most unsettling mind is not the one that knows the most, but the one that keeps discovering what it does not know. What exactly makes a polymath's intelligence so unusual? It is not simply the number of subjects they can study. A person can know mathematics, psychology, history, music, technology, and philosophy without necessarily thinking in an extraordinary way. The deeper difference is what happens when those areas begin interacting inside the same mind. A polymath can look at an ordinary problem and notice something that others completely miss because they're approaching it from a different direction. An idea from psychology may suddenly explain something in business. A principle from biology may change how they understand society. A lesson from history may expose a mistake people are repeating today. And there is another side that is rarely discussed. Real intellectual ability can become uncomfortable, even terrifying to those on the outside when it turns inward. The polymath can question their own assumptions, abandon ideas they once believed, and deliberately become a beginner again. That is where this becomes fascinating. We are going beyond the usual description of polymaths as simply smart people. We are exploring the deeper, underlying traits that reveal why their intelligence can sometimes feel genuinely unsettling. Stay until the end because the final realization may completely change how you understand polymathic intelligence and perhaps how you understand yourself. Let us begin with the way they view reality. They can operate with multiple mental models at once. One of the most powerful things a mind can learn is how to look at the same event from several directions without rushing to choose one single explanation. Most of us naturally develop a favorite way of understanding the world. Someone may explain almost everything through psychology. Another person sees money behind every decision. Someone else focuses entirely on culture, biology, politics, childhood trauma, or personal responsibility. The problem begins when one explanation becomes the answer to everything. When you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. A polymath, however, can hold several competing explanations in their mind at the exact same time without feeling overwhelmed. Take a person who suddenly quits a job. For the average observer, one explanation usually suffices. One explanation might be purely psychological. Perhaps they are burned out. Another observer might say it is economic. Maybe the salary no longer makes sense compared with other opportunities in the market. A cultural explanation might suggest they grew up believing that staying in one job forever is a sign of loyalty, and they are finally breaking that generational curse. A biological explanation might consider sleep, chronic stress, or physical exhaustion changing their brain chemistry. A historical explanation might ask whether macro changes in the industry have gradually made the person's position unstable, forcing a preemptive exit. For a polymath, none of these explanations automatically cancels out the others. Several can be true at the same time. This is where polymathic thinking becomes especially interesting, and to some, highly frustrating. Instead of asking which single explanation is correct, they may ask how much of each explanation is operating in this specific ecosystem. That is a much harder question. It also prevents a common mistake in everyday life. We often judge people using one single piece of information and then build an entire story around it. Someone is rude to us, so we call them arrogant. Someone is quiet, so we call them insecure. Someone spends money freely, so we assume they are deeply irresponsible. But human behavior is rarely that simple. The quiet person may be exhausted. The person spending money may be quietly supporting their extended family. The person who acted rudely may be dealing with a private tragedy you know absolutely nothing about. This does not mean every bad behavior should be excused. It means that for the polymath, understanding must always come before certainty. Multiple mental models make reality far less comfortable because simple answers become harder to accept. But they also make your judgment wildly more accurate. You stop forcing complicated human beings and complex global events into one tiny, convenient box. You allow several possibilities to compete, you examine the evidence, and you remain entirely willing to change your mind. That is not indecision, it is intellectual range. And in a world addicted to fast, absolute opinions, intellectual range is terrifying. This brings us to the next deeply unsettling trait. They can become beginners without becoming mentally smaller. There is a strange, rare kind of courage in deliberately becoming a beginner again. Imagine someone who is already highly skilled, let us say a master of mathematics, deciding to learn portrait photography. On the very first day, they may not understand lenses, exposure, composition, or lighting. They may make basic, embarrassing mistakes that a teenager with a smartphone camera could easily avoid. For someone deeply attached to being competent, that experience can be excruciating, but a polymath can accept it seamlessly. They understand that being inexperienced at something new does not erase what they already know. It simply means they have entered unfamiliar territory. This matters immensely because many people quietly organize their entire lives around protecting the image of being capable. When someone becomes known as the intelligent person, the talented person, or the expert in their office or friend group, they may actively avoid situations where they could look confused. That creates an invisible prison. You become excellent at what you already know because you rarely allow yourself to be bad at anything else. Your world shrinks to the exact size of your current competence. A polymath can break that pattern effortlessly. They might spend 10 years studying one subject, reach the absolute pinnacle of their field, and then deliberately walk into another field where they know almost nothing. They may learn an instrument, study programming, explore watercolor painting, read ancient philosophy, learn a tonal language, or investigate an unfamiliar scientific field. And for a while, they may feel completely lost. To the outside world, this looks like a waste of talent. Why abandon what you are good at? But to the polymath, this is not failure, it is the necessary price of expansion. Think about a child learning to ride a bicycle. The child falls, turns badly, loses balance, and looks incredibly awkward. But the child does not think, I used to be so good at walking, so I should never attempt this new thing. They simply keep learning. Adults often lose that freedom. We become far too concerned with protecting our reputation. The deeper strength of a polymath is the profound ability to separate their core intelligence from immediate competence. They understand that being smart does not mean immediately knowing the answer. It means having the ultimate capacity to figure it out, no matter how foolish they look in the first few hours. This leads directly to the third reason their minds are so terrifying. They see the whole elephant. There is an ancient parable about 9 blind men who encounter an elephant for the first time. Each man touches a different part of the animal. The one who touches the trunk says an elephant is like a thick snake. The one who touches the ear says it is like a fan. The one who touches the leg says it is like a tree trunk. The one who touches the side says it is like a wall. Each man is entirely correct about his specific data point, but completely wrong about the reality of the elephant. They begin to argue, each convinced that his singular experience is the absolute truth. Society operates very much like these 9 men. We organize ourselves into hyper-specialized silos. The economist sees the money. The sociologist sees the crowd. The doctor sees the biology. The polymath is the one who steps back, opens their eyes, and sees the entire elephant. They are what we might call systemic visionaries. But seeing the whole picture is not always a blessing. In fact, it is often a heavy burden. When you can see how all the pieces connect, it becomes agonizing to watch others argue over isolated fragments. If you try to explain the whole elephant to the people touching only the leg or the trunk, they will look at you like you are insane. They will tell you that you are overcomplicating things. They will accuse you of seeing connections that are simply not there. They will say you are too involved in everything or that you are overthinking. This happens because most people are uncomfortable with systemic complexity. They want linear, localized answers. The polymath's ability to synthesize a dozen moving parts into one cohesive reality is deeply intimidating to the specialist who has staked their entire identity on one tiny sliver of truth. And this creates a powerful, relentless sense of intellectual loneliness. When your mind operates by constantly synthesizing vast amounts of disparate information, it becomes very difficult to find peers who can follow your leaps of logic. A polymath does not think in a straight line from A to B to C. They think in webs. They jump from A to Q to Z because they see the underlying thread that connects them all. To an ordinary thinker, this looks chaotic. But to the polymath, it is perfectly logical. This is why polymaths often feel like they outgrow the people around them. It is not out of arrogance. It is simply a matter of pacing and scale. When you crave deep, constant mental stimulation, casual conversation can feel incredibly draining. You find yourself constantly holding back, biting your tongue, and dumbing down your observations just to fit into normal social interactions. You learn to hide the terrifying depth of your curiosity because, frankly, it exhausts ordinary people. But the polymath cannot simply turn off this relentless need for stimulation. It is not just a preference, it is practically a biological imperative. The polymathic brain demands novelty and complexity the way the body demands oxygen. When they are deprived of complex problems to solve or new systems to decipher, they do not just get bored, they become deeply agitated, restless, and even depressed. This is why they often have a dozen tabs open in their browser, 3 half-read books on their nightstand, and an endless list of side projects. They are not scattered. They are grazing across a vast intellectual landscape, gathering the raw materials they will eventually weave together into a new mental model. Another profoundly unsettling trait is their absolute immunity to the accepted narrative. The polymath possesses a distinct passion for discovering the truth, rather than lazily believing what they are told. We live in a world governed by consensus. We are taught to trust the experts, follow the standard procedures, and accept the dominant cultural narratives. But polymaths have a natural allergy to consensus. Because they study multiple fields, they know that the experts in one field are often completely ignorant of the discoveries in another. They know that history is full of moments where the consensus was entirely, devastatingly wrong. Therefore, they refuse to take things at face value. They will dissect a popular theory, hold it up to the light, and test it against the principles of physics, the patterns of history, and the realities of human psychology. If the narrative does not hold up across multiple disciplines, they will reject it, no matter how popular it is. This makes them incredibly dangerous to authority. You cannot easily manipulate a mind that naturally cross-references everything you say against a vast database of independent knowledge. They cannot be swayed by cheap emotional appeals or isolated statistics because they immediately see the broader context that is being hidden. To systems of control, whether that is a rigid corporate structure, a dogmatic academic institution, or a manipulative media landscape, the polymath is a terrifying anomaly. They are a glitch in the matrix of conformity. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the polymathic mind is what happens when they turn this relentless analytical power inward. It is one thing to deconstruct the world around you. It is an entirely different level of bravery to deconstruct yourself. The polymath does not spare themselves from their own critical gaze. They are constantly examining the weaknesses in their own thinking. They hunt for their own cognitive biases. When they discover new information that contradicts their deeply held beliefs, they do not double down in defensiveness. They experience a moment of friction, perhaps a flash of ego, and then they meticulously dismantle their old belief system and build a new one. This level of intellectual fluidity is incredibly rare. Most people build their identity around what they believe. If you attack their belief, they feel you are attacking their very existence. The polymath builds their identity around how they learn. Their beliefs are just temporary tools, entirely replaceable the moment a better, more accurate tool is discovered. This makes them highly unpredictable to ordinary people. A polymath may argue passionately for a certain viewpoint on Tuesday, read a groundbreaking new paper on Wednesday, and completely change their stance by Thursday. To the rigid thinker, this looks like hypocrisy or instability. To the polymath, it is simply the natural evolution of truth. Ultimately, polymathic intelligence is terrifying because it refuses to sit still. It refuses to accept the boundaries that society has neatly drawn around subjects, ideas, and identities. It is a restless, expansive, and deeply systemic way of moving through the universe. It is the recognition that everything is connected and that we are, fundamentally, made of the same fabric as the universe we are trying to understand. If you have ever felt stupid because you could not easily articulate the massive web of connections in your head, or if you have ever been told that you overcomplicate things when you are simply trying to explain the whole elephant, you might just be a systemic visionary. You might be a polymath. It is a path that requires immense mental endurance. It requires making peace with the fact that you will always be a beginner in something and that you will often have to think for 3 people in a room just to get the group to see the actual problem. It can be lonely, yes, but it is also the only way to truly understand the magnificent complexity of the world. If this perspective resonated with you or helped explain a part of your mind you have always struggled to put into words, share this video with someone who thinks differently, leave your experiences in the comments below, and keep exploring what you do not know. Thank you for watching.